All right, so I got the harness kind of laid back out the way it was on the Jeep, and of course I've just kind of got it laid out here. I've got the battery sitting just inside the frame, the fuse box, and then the harness is kind of running up here. That harness used to be the one for under the hood. This distribution panel or distribution center right here was mounted on the Jeep right in this side on the inside of the door opening. Before this, I don't know, PCM or ECM was mounted right here inside the engine bay on the driver's fender. And then you come in here. This harness used to go through the firewall and was right here, but the Jeep truck is much smaller than the Jeep. It's hard to believe, but it is. And then this harness right here, focusing on just the bottom one here, used to go back the whole length of the Jeep. And then this right here is where the taillights used to be, but the taillights have a ground that the fuel pump needs. So I just put the fuel tank out of the Cherokee. I just set it right here on the frame, made sure I had plenty of front slope to pick up fuel. And I've got the wires for the sender and the fuel pump in hooked up. And then the rest of this harness right here comes back. This is for the right tail lights and the washer nozzle for the rear lift gate, if you still have that kind of stuff. And that kind of runs back up into the cab. That runs up into the cab, and then of course it's got it out on the front where the power distribution center is. In here is basically where we've got our dash. And so if we are going to give this a start, well, let's set the camera down here just for a second. So we've got all the switches and everything here just like we would if we were still in the other Jeep. But if I turn this key forward, you'll see the gauges come up. So we've got the airbag light, and that will stay on because the airbag for the steering wheel and the airbag for the passenger side are not hooked up, and I don't know that they will ever be hooked up in this vehicle. So now I just crank it forward to start. See, it cranks right off. The battery's getting a little low because I was using it for some testing while my camera was giving me issues earlier. But you can see now we've got this running, and I killed the engine with the key there. I was having an issue earlier with a no bus fault. And so the no bus fault was being caused by this. This is the airbag module that used to live underneath the center console. As soon as I plug that in here, where I have labeled it SRS, I was getting a no bus fault, and my dash gauges weren't working, and it was also running really terribly. I know it runs really loud right now because the exhaust is off, but it was running really terrible. And so what was happening is that this communication that this system uses to talk to the entire Jeep was malfunctioning because this module is no good. So I think that's part of the reason we're still getting a check engine light, but it is running much better. The gauges are functioning. You know, we're on the right track here. So now it's going to be pull this whole harness back and pull out all the wires that we don't need. So much of what we see up here, like right here, I've got passenger side door, and that would be all your controls for your power windows. Right here's the little button that tells you if your door is open or closed. I might keep that, you know, install a button in here so if you open the door, the lights come on, the interior lights. But here on the rear door, we've got the passenger rear door. We've got the same thing. We've got switches and power controls. We don't have any of those doors on this Jeep or this truck. And then most of this jump over harness, unless it's got the power for the fuel pump running through it, we won't need that. There is a little bit here with the tail lights. We'll keep that because we do need to have right tail light and left tail light. So we'll keep those parts of the harness, but there's a lot of wire here and a lot of extra, you know, shielding that we won't need. So that's going to be my next big project, is to kind of get even here on this under hood harness. So we've got some things here. This is for the cruise control servo. We've got a horn. We've got this little gadget right here is a battery temperature sensor. So if your battery's too hot, I don't think the engine will start if there's a problem. So we've got those kind of things we need to kind of get and eliminate a lot of the harness and get it down to just what we need. Over here we've got the, again, we got the ECM, and that wire runs over to these two plugs right here, which are the transmission hookups. We also have a module up in here for the ASIN, what's it, AW4, and that's right here. That's the transmission control module, and that allows the transmission to actually shift. I was having a little problem getting it started earlier because the transmission got knocked out of neutral or park when it's been jostled in and out, so it wouldn't start until I put the transmission back in park, or at least neutral. So we've got that set up. One thing we will probably keep is this quick connector here for the headlights, and that's all the turn signals and headlights. We're probably going to get that rerouted up here, and then when we put our grill shell on, we'll be able to disconnect and reconnect the headlights, and it also has the correct gauge wire for brighter lights than what we had before. So there's a lot of things we get to keep with this harness, but we need to, you know, take some of them out and get them rerouted. Like this engine full harness here, I'm sure we won't need as much wires that are going through this as there are right now. So we'll start taking them out, and then we'll get it cleaned up and give you guys a look at what that looks like all cleaned up. One big thing that you need to note when you're doing a startup is you can see this speaker wire I've got through here, and I'm just using it as a ground wire or reference wire. So all the way around the Jeep, I don't have anything terminated yet. I don't have any, you know, screws for grounds. So I just ran all of the grounds together to reference, and they all run right behind the battery right here. I've got it all exposed because, again, it's ground, so just leave that exposed, and that hooks back into this negative terminal. So that's how I was able to get everything working and test it. At least after moving it, nothing's really significantly damaged. Coils are all good. That was one thing I was worried about because it got hit here quite a bit, and that you know, we've got good function. So we've got a lot of work to do here, and I'm hoping to tackle some of this wiring harness fun in the morning. But at least you guys get to see that it does run, and it's very loud, but it is a step in the right direction. After we get the electrical worked out, it's going to be time to go back to the brakes, get those worked out with the brake booster, whether we use the one I had already set up or we need to get a different setup. Move the pedals, you know, that's going to be something for us to do. We just need to get more systems online, and then we can think about getting this thing out for a little bit of a drive once we get it registered after the COVID crisis. So thanks for watching, and we'll see what we get to coming up. I don't know if you guys, if I've introduced you or not, but Desi's hanging out right here. He's the shop dog you see in the videos a lot. In today's video, we're going to try and pare down this harness a little bit. So this harness obviously is for a full vehicle, for a full Cherokee, and it's got a lot of functions that we didn't need. Right here is a pile of connections that came out of the rear harness that goes basically from the driver's front area back to the taillights, and then it crosses over the hump, goes up to the internal fuse box or the power distribution center, back to the right rear tail light. And so in that harness, we took everything out of it, and we were able to get it down to just a few essentials, which are, you know, the taillight wires that go out, the few wires that go up to the power distribution panel to allow the taillights to have fuses, and the fuel pump. So we got rid of all of this extra stuff, and that's what I'm working on today. We're going to try to get rid of stuff like the airbags and console lights and stuff like that. I don't plan on running stuff like that right now. And when I get these done, you can see even on most harnesses I try to leave a little bit of a tail so I can get back into it, but like this harness right here, we'll probably cut them off close with like maybe a 1 inch remaining, and that's just so that if we need to get that wire, we can come back in and solder to it. But I'm very confident that most of the wires we take off we will not need, so I'm just giving myself a little bit of a way to hook it up if I made a mistake. So we're gonna try to do this harness. This harness ran from the middle of the dash and basically underneath the console and to the power distribution center. So this hooks into the fuse box that would be on the passenger front kick panel. So we're going to try to get some of that stuff out of here and see what we can come up with. All right, folks. Gonna have to put this project out in the barn. We got some other stuff I got to get worked on, but I wanted to show you the harness that I had cleaned up. You can see it does track much better. Still got a little bit of a mess right here. All this stuff goes to the column, so that's your cruise control, your wipers, your all that stuff. And then this one goes out to the headlights. That's the headlights and the fan. So that's there. Still bonding everything with alligator clips, so we can get enough to get it to run. Not that I'm driving it, but just nice to have that. You can see that we've got it looking pretty clean with the wires. They drop back here right now, and they do make nice connections. So, you know, that's coming from this loom right here, goes out to the engine and the transmission. That's where we pick up that stuff. Planning on the other side cutting an access hole, somehow making a cover in there to drop the wires out and run them to the front. So that will be probably what I do with all of them. I'll run even these ones that go to the inside of the cab. Maybe they'll go down the tunnel. I haven't quite decided, but we'll come up with a solution for that. But for now, let's see what's going on. I'd be lying to you if I said I put it all together and it started the first time after I did all this modification. It was an easy fix though. The easy fix was that while I was wiring this up, I didn't bolt this connection in to the power distribution panel, so I wasn't getting power to all of the circuits that make it start. So come over here. The key I'm going to relocate into the dash eventually, but we'll grab this and let's go. There's still some issues with the sensors and the way that they're going, and also the lack of exhaust that makes that extremely loud, but we are able to get it running with just a flick of the key. I checked the OBD2. There's only like 4 codes, a couple of evap codes, and this I don't know, ambient battery temperature. I'm not really sure what that guy does, what it really offers you, but that's disconnected, so that was causing a code. We might be able to get that one worked out without much issue. So gonna have to see where we get going on this vehicle next, but for right now we are at a decent stopping point. One thing I did want to mention is this has this truck cab is an earlier cab than my truck cab. My truck cab was missing the entire floorboards. You can see I still had to replace this one, but mine was missing it all the way underneath the toolbox. So this one still has the toolbox floors in it. I had to do a little bit of repair on the rockers. It still needs ground down, re-welded, and then I'll probably go ahead and raptor line the inside and the outside, the floor for sure, just to make sure it's all good once we get all the metal work done. So we still gotta fix it over here by the pedal and fix the tunnel. But those are things that we'll get to coming up. The big things to kind of get going are make sure we've got the braking figured out, get the engine running, and then getting the drive line put together. The fuel tank I'm not really worried about. I still think I'm going to go with that JK fuel tank. I just got to come up with a way to source one. But going from this spline shaft here on the back of the transmission to the JK input flange is a problem we got to solve. Just need to make sure we get that one solved correctly. And then what I was going to get to is this dash. So this is an earlier truck, and it's got the dash with the rectangle gauges for your volts and fuel and whatever else they had. And before I got rid of my cab, I did cut out the panel for the center gauge. I know some people might be a little upset. Can't please everybody, but I'll probably go ahead and either graft this one right into here or plug this off and make this what I'm going to do. I went out and bought a digital gauge that fits that spot. It's from a company online. I think it's called Speed Hut. They make gauges for CJ Jeeps, and it's the exact same opening in this truck opening. So we'll be able to put the gauge in, and then it'll bolt up to these threads right here. We just need to get that mounted in there. I did, when I removed this, I took out where these holes go. So one's your ignition and one's your lights. So we'll be able to get our light switch and our key switch lined up in those holes and make it look presentable. But we got to get that dash swapped over to the later dash so that I can run the new gauge when it comes in a month or so. They always have a long lead time because they custom build the gauges, so I'm not upset about that. But we just had to wait on parts, so that's kind of where we're going to be. Also, I'm not sure if we're going to run that gauge off of the OBD2. I don't know that the Jeep supports that. If it does, we'll run the wiring off of the OBD2 port, which I kept right here. My plan was to mount it right on the front, underneath the seat, so you can still connect to it. But if we can run it off of that, we'll either splice in the back side of that port, or we'll hook it up however they'd like you to do it. But we'll see if the gauges can be supported by OBD2, or if they need to run individual mechanical or, you know, probe style. So we'll cross that bridge going forward soon, I hope, because I'd like to have this project running. I don't know, at least running. I'm not sure it'll be perfect. I'll probably slap my old doors on with the bottoms rusted out, but at least you can go drive it. So that's my first project, is to get it to run and drive a little bit, check it out, and then we'll start working on the big issues and trying to finish up the body work. But that's going to end this episode of CV Rebuilds. Hope you guys enjoyed some of the progress I made. You can see how you can do it. It's a lot of, I mean, it seems like a lot of work, but if you just take one wire at a time, since these are all color coded, one color is the code, it's not too hard to do. You can tackle this project. And I guess that's my advice, is, you know, take the project one piece at a time and see where you guys can go. Thanks for watching.